I rise to also speak about human trafficking, and I associate myself with the comments of Senator Heitkamp. Human trafficking is a modern-day form of slavery that is alive, active, and must be stopped. Many of the stories we hear from trafficked survivors sound more like plots in a horror movie than real life in the United States of America. But these stories are not fiction. Over and over, we hear stories about young Americans forced into captivity, about young Americans forced into sexual exploitation, about young Americans who have no freedom to say no to a violent pimp, but are still tagged with prostitution charges before they even turn 18. Human trafficking is a crime that rips families apart, breaks down the trust in our communities, and shatters young American lives. Mr. President, it is long overdue that Congress pay close attention to this issue, and I commend my fellow female senators for bringing this issue so boldly to the floor of the Senate. Today, I want to talk about what Senator Heitkamp talked about, the vulnerabilities that lead to these girls and boys becoming trafficked, and how vulnerable they remain even after they've managed to escape from their pimps and their captivity. In small towns and big cities, thousands of young Americans are trafficked each year. Every single institution that these boys and girls ever relied on simply failed them, failed to protect them. Their families failed to protect them. Their schools failed to protect them. The foster system they were given to failed to protect them, and our laws are failing to protect them. Last month alone in Rochester, New York, the U.S. attorney there announced the arrest of 7 people on trafficking charges. Their victims were as young as 14 years old. The U.S. attorney said, quote, "The victims in many cases were singled out because they were identified as being vulnerable. We have the responsibility in Congress to end these crimes against the most vulnerable among us. We should pass Senator Leahy's Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act, which would provide real help to runaway youth who are especially vulnerable to this exploitation. We should pass Senator Klobuchar's Stop Exploiting Through Trafficking Act, which would discourage the prosecution of minors who have engaged in commercial sex acts. We should pass Senator Cornyn's Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act, which would support programs for survivors of human trafficking and child pornography, and ensure that the Johns who are buying trafficked victims are actually prosecuted in federal court. And we need a law that would vacate the criminal convictions of trafficked victims, because these girls and boys are not criminal. They are not prostitutes. They are victims who deserve a chance to lead a fulfilling life. I'll be introducing an amendment to Senator Klobuchar's bill that would vacate the criminal convictions of trafficked victims who are forced to break the law while they were trafficked. No victim of human trafficking should have to go through life, even after gaining their freedom from their trafficker, with prostitution charges on their record. We have an obligation to protect the most vulnerable Americans, and this vacatur amendment would help us do just that. I know that if Congress does its job and does everything it can to help victims of human trafficking, thousands of young women and men in this country will have a chance to live a fulfilling life. Thank you.